Gentleman from coastal Louisiana, Mr. Landry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Admiral, thank the Coast Guard for their service to this country. You know, the Coast Guard's reputation in my district and their approval rating is, I can promise you, better than EPA's. And I want to help you keep that approval rating. I'd like to see y'all take it up a notch. I'm just curious, do y'all ever sit around and work on deregulating things or looking at regulations that maybe are not working or overburdensome to the industry and say, you know what, we applied this way back when and maybe it's not applicable today and we should take those things off of the books? Or do we, and it's not just, you know, I'm not pointing it at the Coast Guard, but it just seems like all our agencies do come up with ways to continue to add regulation after regulation after regulation.
Yes, sir. In fact, we not only do that, we were directed to do so in the executive order 13563, the retrospective review of regulations, and in fact have identified a number of regulations that are undergoing scrutiny to see if maybe they need to be revised or removed. So take your point. Yes, sir.
Well, and you know, 100 years ago, 90% of all of the cargo brought into the United States traveled on an American flag vessel. Today, 95% of the cargo coming into this country comes in on a foreign flag vessel. Any idea why?
Well, I think the reasons are quite complex. I'm not sure I could give a satisfactory answer in just a few seconds. But it obviously relates to international competitiveness, competitive advantages internationally. As an American, of course, I'd love to see that all be on U.S. ships.
And I believe you. I'm just wondering if the regulatory environment that we create, and again, I'm not just singling out the Coast Guard, but I think it starts, you know, all the way from EPA to OSHA to the impact they have in our shipyard, you know, in our shipbuilders, and then putting that burden on the mariners themselves. If all of these mounds of regulations that other foreign flag vessels are not subjected to, if that doesn't have anything to do with causing our maritime industry to be less competitive in the world, I mean, do you think there's any correlation?
Well, let me assure you, sir, we make every effort to make sure that U.S. regulations are consistent with international regulations. And for foreign ships that come into U.S. ports, we are very diligent in making sure they comply with those same standards. It is not an easier path from a regulatory standpoint for a foreign ship to conduct business in the United States than for a U.S. ship. We do everything we can to level that playing field.
Okay, and I just want to touch on the two things, and I appreciate the ranking member bringing this up. These TWIC visits. You know, I get my passport in the mail, and I know you said it's the Department of Homeland Security, but is it possible for y'all to help us garner the support necessary? Or I mean, would the Coast Guard be willing to step out with other members of Congress and telling and supporting a position that we eliminate this second visit?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm competent to speak to that, sir, because I know there's some technical reasons that TSA has cited as far as validating the biometrics on the card.
You know, we could come up with an excuse. They can come up with an excuse for just about anything. And I guess I'm looking for an agency such as the Coast Guard, which utilizes a lot more common sense than anyone else. If they could look at DHS and say, I don't believe that you're using any common sense.
But what we have tried to do, and I think successfully, is given the fact that TSA has their system, is make it as easy as possible for mariners who also have to receive a merchant mariner credential, so that we don't add to the burden of having to go in to, you know, collect biometrics in addition to what TSA is requiring.
Well, what amazes me is the fact that we're going to have a constituent of mine in the second panel who TSA wouldn't even allow in the airport using his TWIC card. I mean, you know, it just, it's amazing. Here we have a card issued by them. They're making the man go to 2 different visits. We're talking about this, you know, biometric excuse. He goes up to the TSA counter to get into the airport, you know, to go through security. He hands them their card, and they say, it's not a valid ID. You see what I'm saying? you know, and so anyhow, I just would appreciate it if y'all could lend us some support on that. In the ballast water, a little more Clorox. You know, I'm serious, sir. I mean, does it have to be that complicated? I'm just.
Well, sir, again, we rely on the scientific input from EPA as to what works, and even as we look at, you know, ballast water management systems and different types of systems that may use chemicals, there are concerns that, you know, okay, what do you do after you've killed all the bugs in the tank? Can you then discharge that water? So because it may in fact create other environmental damage, and I would defer to scientific experts on that.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.